Welcome to Speedrunner Reviews. In this series I analyse games using the mindset of speedrunning and look at the game from three perspectives. First, the casual experience, which is how most people first play the game. Next, the speedrunning experience, including all the interesting tech and how well the game holds up as a speed game. And finally, the tool-assisted speedrun, showing what the game looks like when pushed to the theoretical limit. Although given this is a new game, we won't have a tool-assisted speedrun. I'll look at the 100% speedrun instead. If you already know the game and want to jump straight to the speedrun part, I've left timestamps in the description and chapters on the video. And today we're looking at Devious Dungeon, released for modern consoles. Before we get stuck into it, if you do enjoy this video, consider subscribing to keep up to date, as it helps out the channel a whole bunch and I should have a new video out each fortnight. So my history with this game comes from when I first really got a PS4 and started looking around the PlayStation store. I'd bought the PS4 for ukulele speedrunning, but had been trying out a few other games on this system. Eventually one day I just decided to have a look through the PS4 store and find some indie games. Devious Dungeon came up, and it's a banger. I originally picked this because I've been trying out a few other RPGs at a time and really enjoying them. But one thing that sort of got to me is I wanted an RPG style game, but something that I could switch my brain off with and just basically hit stuff with a sword. And that's what Devious Dungeon is. Not really any story, not really much complex progression. You literally just hit stuff with a sword, get coins and the XP, and you level up. It's simple, but it's good. Now don't get me wrong, sometimes complexity is good. Except the beauty of this game is if you've had a really long day, you just switch your game off, you still get all the cool stuff about RPGs, all the leveling up and progression, but you just don't really have to think about it. It's a little bit easier than playing like an unfamiliar RPG and then just constantly having to figure out which NPC you need to talk to progress. The game's broken up into lots of 3 levels, and then after each 12 levels you come across a boss. Beat 5 bosses, and that's the game done. Now, the later levels get quite tricky and the enemies deal a lot of damage, so you're going to have to level up to tackle these ones. And every time you come into a level, it sort of picks one of many random maps. So if you're not familiar with this game, you may actually think that the levels are randomly generated because there's just so many of them. This keeps it fresh and makes it so that if you die because one of the maps was really tricky, you might get an easier map next time, and you can sort of use that to gradually inch your way through the game. On each map, you're looking for a key to open a door, and you've actually got to find the door itself to get in, and that's what you have to do to progress. And to be honest, I'm not sure if they were inspired by this, but one of the reasons I subconsciously like this game is because it's basically the same system as Galahad for the Sega Mega Drive Genesis, also known as Lander. You get the key thing, and then you got to use it to find a door which looks very similar to the door in Devious Dungeon. Now I know keys and doors are nothing new, but they do look quite similar visually, so that's why I wonder if there was some inspiration there, or maybe I just like it because it's nostalgic. Now along with keys and doors, you can also hit boxes and enemies to sort of level up, and there's also secret areas to find in most of the maps. So they're just through hidden invisible walls like that, and once you get used to some of the maps you can find the secret areas. You can also get clued into where they are if there's just like a random platform leading you up to a wall for no reason. There might be a secret area behind there. Now secret areas are good because you can use them to get more money, but one other thing you can do is look at the quest menu in the game, and if you complete certain quests you can also get money from doing that. And I should also mention the combat in this game. So basically you've got your jump and your sword attack, that's it. And with your jump and sword attack, if you keep holding down the sword button, you will literally just keep swording no matter what. If you try and move along the floor like this, you'll move really slowly, so it can make for some nuanced combat. But if you jump, you can just jump and go really quickly through the air. So one thing that you can do is sort of come towards enemies and just keep swording them. And then when you're dealing with enemies, you can like jump back to try and avoid taking damage. And this has some strategy, so for example with the bosses, you can basically just keep slashing at the boss and then jump out of the way when it does its little attack, and then just jump around the back of it and do various little strategies like that. If you can avoid the damage in the bosses, then usually you don't need to level up too much for these. The reason you'd be leveling up is to actually tackle the maps themselves and try and avoid dying. But I think just the small thing that when you slash your sword and you jump backwards, you keep facing the same direction you already were, makes for some really interesting combat. Every time you get to the end of a block of 3 levels, you get to these two guys. One of them will heal you and one of them will sell you items. And the item progression is pretty much as you'd expect. You've got various swords and stuff you can buy, and they go up in price and up in damage as you progress through. You can buy armor and it does a similar thing. Now, you would think with potions, rings and amulets they would give you like spells and stuff. No, they don't. They just sort of increase your attack and defense and whatnot. It's a bit of a weird system, but it's just the way it works in this game, and it sort of feeds into the simplicity that I talked about before. The rings and amulets aren't really worth it. They scale up kind of too quickly for what it's worth. However, I think the programmers may not have realized how broken the potions are. Essentially, the potions go up by $50 each time, and at the start they only go up by $25. Now, the original potions here pretty much only give you 1 more stamina or 1 more strength, so they're not really that good compared to the other items. But eventually, they give you 2 more stamina, and eventually they give you 3 more, and then 4 more. And if you're buying something that gives you an extra 4 strength for $400, that is very cheap. For comparison, at this point in the game, if I wanted to buy a new weapon, I would be paying an additional $2,000 for an extra 2 strength, essentially. So basically, potions are overpowered. Apart from that, the rest of the stuff in the store is pretty balanced. Although I remember when I played this game the first time, I'm like, I just want to hit stuff with a sword, I don't want to do spells. So I actually avoided potions overall and made it a lot harder for myself. I guess the other option to choose with this whole shopping section is whether or not to heal. Basically, you got to get through the block of 3 levels without dying. If you die, you go back to the start of the block of 3 levels, so you may want to come into that on full health. However, if you get a level up, your health is going to refill. But also if you die, your health is going to refill, and there's not really much penalty to dying. In fact, when you die, you actually get a little cash bonus based on what level streak you had before you died. So dying will top up your cash, send you back to this little shop area, and basically give you full health again and more money to buy more items. So for that reason, it's not really worth healing casually unless you're going for the quests, because these quest numbers of how many cannoners I need to kill, that resets when you die. So that might be one reason not to. So yeah, with some of the items being a bit unbalanced and some of the death mechanics being a bit unbalanced, there is some stuff to cheese in this game, but I kind of do like that about the game. Most stuff is pretty sound, except for example the second boss, where it throws this really scary fireball attack at you, but the fireball deals literally 1 damage. So if you just stand here and hit it, you're absolutely fine. If you try and jump around and avoid it, you'll probably hit the eye itself, which deals heaps of damage. And as much as there is some stuff that's unbalanced and fun, they did make an effort to balance the game in other areas. So for example, when you kill a boss for the first time, it drops heaps and heaps of cash, but the next time that you kill it, it drops not nearly as much. So overall, if you like what you've heard about it, I'd give this game a try. It's a pretty good time. Just switch your brain off and have fun. So I ended up doing some runs of this game. There's 100% and the Any % categories. They're broken up by easy and hard, but I'm fairly sure that's not an option in the game anywhere, or at least not in any version that I've seen, so that probably should be taken off the leaderboard. These were the times that I got 2 years ago, but in preparation for this video I've been grinding down the game quite a bit since then. We'll talk about 100% first, because those strategies end up being kind of useful in any %. My original approach to this game was doing essentially what was a good casual run and getting a 121, but in the most recent runs I've done of this, I've really gone and optimized 100% so that those skills could be transferred across. Now, the 100% category of this game essentially means that you have to buy all the items in the shop, and you need a lot of gold to do this. So a lot of the strategies I'll talk about in this section is basically how to get gold quickly. Now, I got very invested in unpacking this game and seeing how it works. First thing I did was pretty much pull all the maps. Now, pulling the maps is, no joke, a tedious process. Essentially, if you press triangle, the map will come up, and you can trace out more and more of the map just by doing this. What I had to do was trace out pretty much all the map by rubbing up against every single wall, as well as finding all the secret areas, then screenshotting it right at the end. It took ages to do this. Now, here's an example of just some of the maps that I pulled. This is maybe about a quarter of what's in the game in total. So we can sort of look around. A map would look like this. Now, you've got your starting points. So up here would be a starting point, although some maps, and quite a lot of maps actually, have 2 possible starting points, the red ones there. The end door I put in purple, and that's always in the same spot conveniently. And keys could be in lots of different places. I kind of started mapping them out doing these process. Keys are the green ones there, but the keys could be up here, for example, up the top, and it just gets really messy, so I sort of stopped. You see this map here, for example, I found 3 possible spots the keys could be. But the keys were valuable because if you do this map, for example, you run down this little corridor, and what you can do is you can run all the way down up to the door and realize you completely missed the key. So every time I get this map in game, I'll run down, go up to check whether or not the key's up here, and then go down. Now, the whole reason I mapped out the maps was so that I could get the secret areas. This map has 2, for example, the little blue stars showing up there, and this map has 1 here. So the secret areas are behind those walls that look like walls, but you can walk through them, so they can be pretty easy to miss. And if you're running 100%, you can get quite a lot of money from these secret areas, so they're worth doing. Now, my original plan was just to mid-run pull up the map and sort of compare it to the list of maps that I had, and then go off the guide and look. And for example, you'd be able to find secret areas like that one up there. And the whole point of this is just to get a little bit more money, but you have a bit of trade-off. The more time you spend looking at the map and trying to figure out which one you've actually got, the more time you're going to lose. And this is where I realized the maps can actually be categorized. So you might notice here in the map, it doesn't actually extend all the way out to the borders, and it shows you that before any of the map is filled out at all. This one I would call sort of like a medium map, not small but not the full border. So essentially you can break them down to these categories. You've got your full maps there, you've got your small maps there, which there are heaps of. You've got your medium maps. The one that I was just on was actually not here, because the maps that I've got almost all of them, but they're slightly incomplete. The ones you got here are horizontal maps, then you've got big horizontal maps, you've got vertical maps, and that's it. I put vertical maps and big vertical maps on the same sheet because there aren't many of them at all. Now I guess you might be wondering, why didn't I just get all the maps? And the reason for that is, well, how do I know that I've got all of them? There could always be missing ones. So I spent a whole bunch of time just mapping out all these, and I guess mathematically, if I've got, like 80 maps here, there's only a 1 in 80 chance that I get a new map, and then how do I know when to stop? So this, I reckon I've got maybe about 95% of the maps, probably missing only like 2 or 3 of these. Now the next issue to face is, how can you tell which type of map you have? Now the vertical ones are obvious, the horizontal ones are reasonably obvious, but this, medium, small or big, you won't immediately visually see if you just see sort of like a blank square with no context for the size. I mean, you can figure it out pretty quickly just with your intuition, but in a speedrun, every second counts. So my solution to this was pretty interesting. I put blue tack on my monitor screen to map out what the different sizes were. And then when you pull up the map, bam, the blue tack lines up exactly with the corner. And for some reason, it's really satisfying to see it snap into place like that. Obviously, if you hit the other blue tack, that would be the medium map. And the big maps are easiest just if it hits the edge of the frame. Alright, so once you've got what type of map you have, then you got to go to this little screenshot and find out which actual one of these maps you've got. Basically, I didn't bother with the small ones because there's just so many of them. But if you got something like one of the big ones here, what you can actually start doing is use your starting point to determine. So if you see you're on the bottom right or the top left, it might be this map here. And I've sort of tried to arrange them originally so that all the top left starting ones are up the top left, but then it just got too messy. The other thing that you can sort of do is you can look for shapes like this, where you've got platforms recognizably in that shape there, and you can usually count them. So if I find that I have this huge set here, I'll know that it's this map, but if I find a section which has 1, 2, 3, I'll know that it's this map. And I'll remind you, the whole purpose of this is so that I know where the secret area is right away, and I can go and farm gold very quickly, because secret areas are one of the best sources of gold in this game, and you need a lot of gold to 100% it. Now, mapping out all these maps comes with a secondary benefit. If you have a map like this, it's fairly linear. You start here, you get the little secret thing there, get the key, you go to the end, it's not a big deal. But if you get a map like the one over here, you could walk around for ages and not find the door. The door is just tucked away in this little corner here. So even in any percent where you're not needing as much money, it's a really good idea to know how it all maps out. Not to mention that money is also good in any percent, because you do want a little bit of level up to deal with having more health to take more damage, and also dealing with the bosses a little bit quicker. Now, my original plan for using these maps was actually to pull them up mid-run and use them, although that just wasn't feasible. It just took way too long. So essentially, what I did was I played with these maps for ages, and every time I play the map, I'd make sure that I go through the secrets and get all of them. Then that gave me a bit of intuition about where the secrets were, and pretty much these days I can load into a map and just by feel know this one's a very common map, for example. Come down here, grab that secret, drop down, check left and right for the key, back up to that secret, and done. And if you get that intuition, yes, it's not going to be perfect. Sometimes you hunt around for doors or keys with maps you're less familiar with, but it's way quicker than actually physically pulling up a map each time, every run. But I can say that that wouldn't have been possible without me mapping it out like this before, because I definitely would have missed common secrets, and for maps I would have just sort of felt up against every wall that I could looking for secrets every time I played it, which would have been really inefficient. And if you're looking to run this game, consider this my gift to you. I've uploaded the maps on speedrun.com. So even with all this mapping, the 100% is still a huge grind, and I struggled to get it much lower than 436. So the next thing I needed to look at was quests. So with the quests, you get 3 quests at a time in the game. So you'd start off with these 3, for example. You get to kill 5 bloodworms, you get 30 gold. Eventually this ramps up, and the amount of gold that you're getting actually gets quite big after a while. Given that you need in the thousands to 100% this game, it is actually really worth doing those quests. So you're going to get the key automatically in the tutorial level, and if you know to go for crates, you can just keep hitting crates and sort of work your way through. This stuff isn't really worth it at this point. You know, hitting 10 crates does take quite a long time, and it's only worth 30 gold. If you find one of those secret areas on the maps, at that point in the game you're getting about 50 gold, and at the end of the game you're getting up to like 200 gold for finding a secret area. So realistically, this isn't great at the start, but just with the scaling, it's worth having these in the back of the mind and going for them. If you went for just quests or just map secrets, you wouldn't be able to optimize 100% much more than the 430 that I got a couple years ago, but by utilizing both of these, I got it down to a 330. Now, the frustrating thing about quests. If you die, the quests reset, so you've got to kill all 5 bloodworms in one sort of life. Bloodworms are only available in the block 1 and block 2, so that's like the first 24 levels, because each block is 12. If, let's say, you had killed 4 bloodworms, by the time you got to the end of level 2 and then fought the boss and went to level 3, sorry, you can't kill any more bloodworms, you're done. The only way that you can get back to level 1 or 2 is to finish the game, which resets your quests, or to die, which resets your quests. So you have to make sure that you're planning these out if you want to use quests optimally. And when I played this game casually, that's probably what happened. I basically didn't kill enough bloodworms, so I had the bloodworms here essentially taking up one of my quest slots, because you only get 3 at a time, and then I wasn't really doing as many quests as I could have. You can see here that essentially, well, if you just go for stuff in level 1 and 2, you can do the first few quests really normally, until you get to 5 executioners, where you have to wait until you get to the second area to do them. But you'd better not go too far into the second area, because then Orc Swordsman you can't kill. It's really nasty. So you can just see here how bad it would be to plan out, because if you want executioners you have to be in level 2, and then you have to do all these quests by level 2. And for this quest here, if you haven't killed 3 eyes by the end of level 2, well then there's no more eyes and you're pretty much screwed. So it's pretty nasty to map out these quests, and even when you get towards the end here, you might be in the 600s and just grinding area 5 over and over and over, and all of a sudden you get a quest for Wolf Riders come up and you can't be in level 5 anymore. You have to be in level 2 to 4 to get those. I didn't bother mapping out all the quests in the game, because at this point you've basically got enough money to 100% it if you've done this many quests, so that's sort of where I stopped. And again, mapping out the quests was a very tedious process. Yeah, going off that Excel sheet takes quite a while just to read off and figure out which 3 quests you're up to. So I made up cards for the quests. Those are the 3 quests I'm doing, and as soon as I finish that Goblin's quest, I move it over and the next quest comes on as vases. You can sort of see how this would work in the game. So whatever quest you use just goes away and the middle slot gets filled up with the next quest from the pile. So it is possible that I never do copper coins at all and I just keep filling out these last 2 quests to finish it off. You can see that on the top of the cards I got which areas you can find them in, as well as like how much of each you need to kill. Basically the whole point of having the cards here is to keep you from having to pause the game and read which quest you're up to, because that just takes more time. I do this in the screen transitions and then basically I can just look down and see which 3 quests I need to be going for, and you just subconsciously try and hit crates more, and you don't bother hitting vases until you're actually up to the quest for vases. Alright, so putting all this stuff into practice, I managed to take the world record down from like the 4:30 that I got a couple years ago down to a 3:21:33. This one's still waiting to come up on the leaderboards, but it is up on YouTube if you're interested. And I can never figure out how to capture 16:9 games with splits, so I will apologize about the aspect ratio crunch here. The game starts off with a little tutorial level, which is always the same, and you can see that right away I'm going for crates and pretty much ignoring everything else, and that's because crates is one of the first quests. I didn't mention it in the movement section, but you can drop down platforms like that, which makes the movement a little bit richer, and you can also get this treasure chest for treasure. Now, if you die in the tutorial, you get to do the tutorial again, but if you do that, the treasure chest doesn't come back, so they did put that safeguard in to stop you from just cheesing it by dying over and over and grabbing the chest heaps. So essentially what this run is it's going through the quests and just trying to optimize the routing through that. Realistically, if I'm doing something like missing a quest because I've progressed too far through the game, that's going to be a reset on the run, because to fix that you've got to die and come back. That does happen a little bit, but this was the run where that happened the least. I do have to do a little bit of backtracking, so you can't just keep progressing forward through the game and get all the quests done. So right after I've done World 2, I have to sort of come back to World 2 afterwards. And you can see here I'm just about to pop a quest by killing this executioner, and well, you can just see how much money we're getting at this point in the game. Now I will mention that even though you're scaling up the amount of money you get, you're also scaling up the amount of enemies you need to kill for the quests, so it's not as good as it seems at first, and the quests don't really pay off until you get into the late game. And you can probably see here why you don't pop many quests casually. So along with enemies being locked out based on what level you're on, you also have no incentive to kill that enemy normally, because it does heaps of damage to you and you have to wait for it to stop moving. Now usually a speedrun would be a glass cannon strategy, but essentially what you want to do in this run is beef up on like armor and defense. The reason is if you die in a set of 3 levels, that's really bad because it sort of blocks your progress moving forward, and it plays almost like a stealth game when you play it like this, because you're just like dodging enemy, like I guess more like a pacifist game. You're dodging enemy attacks and stuff, and you're not really killing enemies unless you need them for your quests or anything. I will be killing enemies in later levels because they drop a lot more gold, but in earlier levels you might as well not kill them because you're really only getting like 1 or 2 gold from each enemy. It's literally not worth the time to take these sword slashes on them. But we will see it especially in Any %. It's really more about how well you can dodge enemy attacks rather than how much damage you can output really quickly. The only downside to this strategy is bosses, but the bosses, even with barely any attack power-ups, still go down quite quickly like this. And if you know what you're doing, you can avoid their attacks because they're pretty predictable. And then, you know, this is not much time in the grand scheme of things compared to if you take a death because you don't have enough defense and then you lose a whole bunch of time because of that. Now, along with getting the quests on the way, I really am trying to get to this 5th set of levels as quick as possible, and one of the main reasons is all sort of the furniture and the enemies drop way more gold on this level, as well as if you find a secret in this level, well, it's just worth like usually 250, 300 gold rather than the 50 base gold that you start with in Area 1. So definitely worth getting here, but then sometimes you need to dip out back to earlier levels for quests, so there's a pretty nuanced trade-off. And among all of this, I'm using my memory of the maps just to go into secret areas wherever they are. That one had EXP, but quite often they have gold, so it's really worth going in whenever you can. Now eventually it sort of works out that we have enough money to buy everything in the game, so I just go and clean up the rest of the money essentially here. One thing that I should mention about progression is that the weapons work kind of weirdly. You'll notice this bottom one here has a speed of 3, whereas the one above it has a speed of 4. Now, I would much rather do 2 less damage, but slash my sword much quicker, especially since a lot of the scenery in the levels, like the boxes and lamps and candles, take a certain number of hits rather than a certain damage threshold. So that second to last weapon is actually optimal, although on the 100% run you still need to grind an extra 3,400 to get the last weapon. And so for that reason in the early game it's worth planning out your weapons very carefully in advance. So you don't want to buy this wooden club first of all, because you're actually going to lose a whole bunch of speed. You want to save up a total of $550 to buy the next weapon that's sensible to get. And again, you don't want to spend $350 to lower your speed, you want to wait until you get $750 to get the speed 4. In any percent, this is sort of my sweet spot getting this weapon with a speed of 4, because basically I'm just trying to up my speed, and I can up damage a bit more effectively by doing stuff like buying these completely broken potions, which we talked about before. But at any rate, the 100% run eventually does get all the items, takes on the very last boss of the game, and then it's done. You can see here that even with like 100% and leveled up, we still don't do that much damage output to the dragon, and part of that is just that I sunk a lot into defense and stuff. But you could usually level up a little bit more than this as well if you weren't just purely grinding for money like I was. Well, the dragon goes down pretty quickly and then that's the game done. Right, now with 100%, we saw me take the 436 down to a 320 essentially. Any percent a couple years ago, I managed to get 121. Guess what my goal is? It was sub-hour, and I finally got it. In fact, I never saw a 59, I went straight through to 58 when I got the sub-hour time, which is really cool. Now I guess usually this would be the sign of a run not being that optimized, that you can just jump multiple minute barriers like this, and that absolutely is true. It can probably come down still a lot more. But it's important to note this game has a lot of random elements with which maps you get. So some maps are really quick because they're small and you're right next to the door, and then others you have to go around for ages and backtrack to get the key. So really, if you got awesome luck, you could probably get like a sub 30 or something in this run. And if you did it segmented, you could get a ridiculously low time. But realistically, for an RTA run where you're getting normal luck, well, the high 50s are probably where it's going to be for the near future. So any percent starts out different right from the tutorial here. You can see that in 100% I was breaking the boxes to do the quests. I'm not going to do such thing in any percent. In fact, I won't be going for any quests in this, but I will still be going for secret areas when I know where they are, just because I do want some money to level up. Basically, I want more defense. If I don't have defense, then I'm going to have to be a lot more careful not to get hit by enemies and stuff, and realistically that is just going to slow me down over time. And at this point, I pretty much remember all the maps internally, so just here I know to hug the left wall because it's like, bam, secret area, treasure chest. So once you get a feel for it, it's not too bad to remember them. Now the run is absolutely chock-a-block full of tense moments here. You can see just how low my health is getting there at 11 hearts left, and this is the last in a set of 3 levels, and unfortunately I get hit a few more times here. So if I die on this, I go back a full 3 levels. If I get through this, then I sort of hit the next checkpoint. And there's always a bit of trade-off, because if I'd healed up before going into this set of 3 levels, then I wouldn't have had this issue, but I would have lost time and money doing that. So very, very scary, down to 5 health, even a little bit lower than that, but eventually we do make it. Now I'm actually not going to heal up, even though I'm on 4 health. What I'm going to do instead is go into the next level and die to this enemy, and as I said before, you actually get a cash bonus from dying to the enemy. It was a full $182. So dying is almost incentivized in this game. The only reason you might not is because the quest count is reset, so that's part of the reason why I'm not even bothering to go for quests in any percent. And this strategy just gets used all over. Like, why pay the 50 gold for healing if I can go straight into the boss, take a death, and that just gets me back to full health for the boss anyway. Yes, it's a little bit slower than paying the 50 gold for healing, but it's definitely worth it because you can use that 50 gold on like weapon upgrades and stuff. The only change to this is the later game where I do start paying for healing, just because 50 gold at this point is a much smaller chunk of your total money, and you don't really need that many more upgrades at this point. Now, although we don't have money farming tech as much in any percent, it has a lot of tech in terms of enemy damage. So you'll notice on this top one I take 9 damage from that, but if I get damaged by this slug guy, I take a lot more damage. So you've got to keep sort of internal track of how much damage each enemy is dealing, And not to mention, the enemy attacks actually deal a different amount than hitting the enemy body itself. Normally hitting the body deals you a lot less damage, and that's what you want to go for if possible. Almost the inverse of this happens when you're trying to take a death to reset your health. So here I could take body damage off this guy, or I could take damage from his big club, and then it would deal a lot more. But then you're optimizing whether you do that, or whether you just keep getting hit so that you can keep getting hit consistently. One big strategy that we see is using spikes to avoid damage. So if I'm having trouble to avoid these cannonballs, I'll just like bam, spikes to get iframes and then run straight through. The iframes are pretty short in this game, so you've got to use that strategy sparingly, but it's absolutely something to keep in mind because spikes only ever deal 1 damage, and if you're getting hit from spikes, you're pretty much safe from all other damage. If you get hit by these eye shots, they're worth heaps of damage, but the original easier eyes, like the red ones, they don't deal nearly as much. And you'll get a feel for what enemy types deal heaps of damage. So for example, these cannonballs that this guy shoots, they deal like heaps of damage for this point in the game. Especially the original cannon shooters deal heaps of damage as well. So that's a little strategy you can use. I have played around with a bit too much in the past, where I've basically taken damage on every spike that I see just to avoid taking damage on actual enemies. And that's a bad strategy because like the 1 damages that you're taking are absolutely going to stack up and then you're just going to die anyway. So you really only got to use it if there's like a small corridor and you've got to get past an enemy strategically or something. Now, one other strategy that I have played with is not leveling up much intentionally. When you get a level up, it actually completely restores your health. So originally I was trying to save all the level ups for the later areas of the game so that I could basically guarantee a level up just by killing a handful of enemies because they'll give heaps of experience and get a free health refill. But in all my testing, this ended up being just a little bit worse to do completely intentionally, just because, well, then you're under-leveled for those later areas. But I do sort of subtly do it throughout the run. And I'll just finish off by talking about boss fights. So these actually matter in any percent, and this is one of the bits of tech that I found out when I ran it several years ago. Basically just how to avoid all damage from the bosses. This one's pretty easy. You just jump over that thing when he does it, you count 8 slashes, then jump over him there, behind him so that he doesn't sword you, rinse and repeat. I also mentioned this boss is normally a lot easier if you've got more power-ups, but in any percent we're really just rushing through, and I'm much weaker than I should be at this point. Alright, next up we got boss 2. It's an absolute pushover. It's fireball things, deal 1 damage, that's it. So you're basically not going to die even if you have no level ups or no armor or whatever in this boss. If you try and jump around and hit the eye, it deals heaps of damage. So you just want to stand on this platform right on the edge, keep swinging your sword. Even if you accidentally fall off this platform, there's only just spikes underneath which deal 1 damage, so that's normally fine. As long as you don't actually touch the eye, you basically can't lose this fight. It's pretty funny. And the cool thing about it is they actually disabled the spikes in that area when the boss is defeated, and I presume that's to stop you like dying on the boss to farm money. In terms of glitches, I would suspect if we find a way to die in this room after the boss is completed and after we've collected all the money, I would almost wonder if you can still get the full money bonus from beating the boss again, because normally once you beat the boss the second time it spits out way less money. If that was the case, that would be a big time saver, I would think. Boss 3 is definitely the scariest boss until you know what you're doing. You gotta wait for it to spin there, and you've really got to make sure that he spins to the left, and then he always stops just short of this door frame. You can just go and hit him there. You count your slashes, you basically let him do his fireball attack and hit you. That doesn't deal much, but make sure you jump before he spins again. Now this strategy here is so sick. Basically, you jump up here, and he always does his axe attack, which it does heaps of damage to you. But because you've lured him up against a wall, all of his axes just hit the wall and they don't damage you at all. At this point, the fight's still a little bit scary, but as long as you're reasonably careful, you're pretty safe to beat the rest of the fight here. Unfortunately, in my any percent PB, I was a little bit underleveled and a little bit not careful enough, so I did take a death on this fight. That's probably one of the bigger time savers that I could have had over the run. But given how punishing this game can be, not taking a death at all at any point in the run is reasonably unrealistic, especially if you're intending to be as underleveled as you can be to save time, and just being as quick as you can be so that you're not just tiptoeing around every corner wasting a whole bunch of time like that. Boss 4 is absolutely the hardest boss in the game, so essentially it just walks slowly towards you. So this is where sort of the jumping and moving back strategy comes in really handy. And then eventually it's going to stop and do this like ground slammy attack here. Best thing to do there is just stand on the edge of the platform so you can still get some hits in. But actually getting hits in this phase without taking damage is really difficult. The other thing is, if you hit this guy's body, it actually does deal quite a bit of damage to you. You then have a bit of RNG, so it can fire the red fireballs or the blue fireballs. Red fireballs deal 1 damage, blue fireballs, I don't know the exact amount, but they deal like heaps of damage. So you just got to be conscious of that, and if you get bad luck and all blue fireballs, it is very easy to lose a life on this fight and have to try again. Now the very last boss, the dragon, it is pretty hard if you're not careful, but basically you just jump over here to avoid the fire attack, jump back, and then you wait for it to do its second attack, which are these little fireball things, and then you just jump uppy downy to avoid those. Similar to the golem dude, the blue ones deal heaps of damage to you, and the red ones deal barely any. So if you knew what color you were going to get, you could just keep attacking the dragon and hope that the fireballs were red. But if you try and rely on that and you accidentally get blue fireballs, then you're pretty much screwed because you're going to take way too much damage. And again, I'm fairly underleveled, so this fight goes on for a while, but in my opinion that makes it a bit more interesting than if you could just kill the boss really quickly. In terms of upgrades, at this point I just have that first weapon that has 4 speed, and I didn't bother progressing past that much, and I got all those ring upgrades as well, just so that, well, they're good for the money, and that last ring upgrade gives you 4 strength for $400, which is amazing. And before we finish up, I'll just show this cool little soft lock. Basically, in the credit sequence, if you hit the map button at the wrong time, I'm not sure how precise it is, you basically pull up the map and it goes all through the credits, and then you're stuck on the title screen with the map up with basically no way to escape it. I don't know, maybe that could be useful somehow. Could be worth investigating. So overall, I'd definitely give this game a try. It's really fun, and it's actually a really addictive speedrun once you sort of get your head around the maps and know where you're going. That's going to be all for this video, and thanks so much for watching.